Hi, my name's Lauren of Lauren's Cravings over on Instagram. Today's video is primarily to discuss my son Bryce's tongue tie, but what I also want to talk to you about is what to expect in the early days and weeks of your breastfeeding journey based on my experience. Bryce and I are currently sat outside at the moment, so if you do hear some rattling, it's because he's playing with the little hanging toys on his bouncer. He may need to join me at some point in this video, so you'll get a cameo appearance depending on how much Sophie the giraffe can keep him amused. So I'm just going to approach this video in stages, chronologically, day by day. Obviously I'll skip out days. I'm not going to give you a day by day account because I'm doing this now at 5 months postpartum, so I don't think I could if I wanted to. The first 3 months are a bit of a blur. You're in a bit of a bubble for that period, so I wouldn't be able to, I think, recount every single day. Or maybe it's I don't want to, who knows. So obviously I harvested colostrum before giving birth, and that was in preparation for if anything was to go wrong at birth. But what that did equip me with was a familiarisation with hand expressing, which was worthwhile because I learnt such things as I had to be warm at the time. So actually if I found myself cold, and you know how you let your nipples harden when you're cold, I wouldn't actually get any colostrum out at that point. I was sitting beside my wood burner and actually just being quite cosy in a house coat, and that's when I was getting the colostrum out quite effectively. So it teaches you things that you need for hand expressing, which also comes in handy when you are breastfeeding. So that's just an extra tip. I would familiarise yourself with it, do that before the baby comes, and that way you know that if you need to hand express at any point, and I will tell you when there is a situation where you may need to, albeit I did use a silicone breast pump, then you know that you've got that skill there. On my Instagram, I actually have a highlight just named colostrum. I've referenced some resources which will link you through to how you harvest colostrums and a method for doing so, and also the benefits of colostrum and why you may want to harvest colostrum if you're interested in doing it. So take a wee look over at Lauren's Cravings on Instagram if you want some more information on that. So when I gave birth to Bryce, everything went to plan. So I did get the golden hour, which is skin to skin exactly directly after giving birth. And what they encourage you to do is latch them on fairly quickly. So the midwives at the Royal Alexandra Hospital were really good in that regard. So they offered me help with latching. They said I want some support. They stayed with me. She also gave me a tip to use rugby ball hold when I got home using a nursing pillow because of the size of my chest. There is multiple different positions you can try. There isn't just the, you need to hold them, cradle them sort of thing, because that can be uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially if you have a C-section, for example. So there's the cradle, cross cradle, koala, rugby ball. I found the rugby ball really, really beneficial in the early days, albeit not so much probably after week 4. But one thing to look into is probably different positions, because you will want to have a play around with what works for you. What I used in the hospital was actually lean back with the baby on top of you. So that's like the natural nursing position, because the baby, given a chance, will actually root up your body and latch on itself. Takes a wee bit of time, but they do eventually get there. It's just a natural rooting. You'll find that they push up with their feet quite a bit, and that is what they're doing. They're just trying to like propel themselves up towards your boob to latch on. So Bryce latched on fairly well. Everything was looking quite good. Everything with my birth had went okay, so the only reason that they actually offered me an overnight stay was because I'd chosen to breastfeed. So they said if I wanted additional support I could stay in. I chose not to because it was during COVID, and that was going to limit the time that Jonathan, my husband, could come in to see the baby. And also I liked knowing that I would have him on hand if anything, if the night was really bad or anything at all. Whereas I'd had friends that had given birth just the month or 2 previously, and they said the sleep deprivation was really bad and your partner can't watch the baby even for you to get a couple of hours. So I chose to go home, gave birth about 8:20 in the morning, went home at 4 o'clock that afternoon. A big decider in that for me though was because I had spoken to Emily of @mamas.milk on Instagram, and she had already been providing some advice, so I knew that I had the resources there. There is also an infant feeding team based out of Wishaw Hospital in Lanarkshire. So I knew if I needed it, I could call upon, you know, midwives that were specifically trained in breastfeeding to come and assist me. One thing that is critical to mention, right, which I've seen in so many breastfeeding forums, I've seen and heard from so many mums that felt that they weren't giving their baby enough, so they actually supplemented with formula in the first few days. So because you're only supplying colostrum in the first few days, colostrum literally comes out in droplets at a time. So you will not be producing that much, but your baby's stomach isn't that big. So I think when they're born, honestly, it is about the size of a walnut. It can only hold about 5 ml total. Even, is it 3 to 5 ml? I think 3 to 5 ml total. So it doesn't take a lot to fill them up. I've heard a lot of people say that their baby was on them constantly. I didn't have that experience in the first few days, and I'll come to that in a wee second, the first 48 hours. But I've heard women who did. That is just your baby trying to get your supply going. That is natural. It is not that they cannot get enough. It is that they are getting your supply going. They are telling your body, hey, I'm here, I've been born, bring that milk in. That is all that is, okay? So one thing that the midwives had said to me, which was actually probably put my mind at ease, and I would have been stressing out had they not said it. So I think it was Cheryl, the midwife at the Royal Alexandra, she was fab. She said, interestingly, some babies don't feed all that much in the first 24 to 48 hours, so don't get too stressed out about it, because everything you read tells you need to wake your baby, you need to feed your baby every 2 to 3 hours, right? And Bryce, I was putting him on and he just wasn't seeming that interested. But she said, don't worry too much about that, because he's still full, he's had so much nutrients and, you know, sustenance from your body, his stomach will still be full. Wait till he's kind of past the meconium, which is the black poo, in the first day or two, and then you start making sure that he's getting fed regularly. So don't worry too much in 24 to 48 hours. Best advice I could have got, because he didn't feed probably all that much in the first 24 hours at all. I think I managed to feed him like 2 or 3 times. He just wasn't seeming interested in being fed, and I think for that reason, but I didn't stress out about it because she'd said that. Had no one said that to me, I'd have been like, now he makes sure and tells me when he's hungry. Yes. But yeah, so I would have probably been like every 2-3 hours waking him up, blah blah blah. I didn't, and he's absolutely fine. But the most critical bit, before your milk comes in, and the same milk, right, but it's your mature milk comes in, day 4, day 5, say, it's only colostrum, and do not think that your baby is not getting enough, right? So your baby, a breastfed baby, will always lose weight. They should gain their birth weight, i.e. they should get back to the weight they were born as within 2 to 3 weeks. Until that happens, and until you can evaluate that, do not be concerned that your baby is on you too much, or wanting to feed too much, or just, you know, doesn't seem to be getting enough because you don't think you're producing enough milk. Your mature milk doesn't come in until you literally get engorged in day 4, day 5, and it also thereafter, it's still normal. Still normal in the first 6 weeks for your baby to be on you lots. It's called cluster feeding. It is a clusterfuck. It can be quite hard going, but honestly, it's normal. So the best indicators of your baby, right, are weight gain and nappy output. So plenty of wet, dirty nappies, and is your baby gaining weight? See if that's happening. See if your baby is on you lots. It's just because they're trying to establish your supply, which is going to happen in the first 6 weeks. So that is normal. So up until that point, I don't think I had that much pain. I think there was maybe a wee bit of a niggling pain, which obviously was the start of it happening in the first few days, primarily on my right side. My milk came in day 4. It was day 4 for me. Trust me, you know when it comes in, they are massive. They inflate. Now, I knew what happened. I keep using these, right, but genuinely until it happens to you, I don't think I can properly explain it, if that makes sense. But I knew they were going to get big, but my God, were they full. They just felt hard and slightly sore because they were so inflated, and it just like leaking. You were leaking milk, and actually they were so engorged I struggled to latch him on as well, which has probably caused a wee bit of the, you know, or worsened the issues. And that, I'll pause this and I'll grab him. There he is. The phone shadow. Anyway, I talk more about engorgement and how you can help relieve that if your baby is struggling to latch in my top 10 breastfeeding essentials for the first few weeks video, but you'll find that in my breastfeeding playlist as well. So for the first 10 days postpartum, you're still under midwifery care. They come out and visit you on day 1, day 2, day 5 and day 10. Now, my milk came in on day 4. In the days after, my right nipple was starting to get really quite sore. So it was a different midwife that attended on my day 5. So when the midwife that I'd had on day 1, day 2 came back on day 10, I mentioned it to her and I said, is there any chance that you could have a tongue tie? Now, the reason I knew about tongue ties was my friend Simone's little boy had one, and also just generally from following like breastfeeding pages and knowing that, you know, I'd got advice from Emily on his latch at this point. Everything was looking good to me, albeit I hadn't engaged with the infant feeding team at this point. But I was like, you could see something, but you do need somebody that's actually trained in checking it to assess the situation. So asked the midwife. She said it did look as if he had a slight tongue tie, but not enough to be concerned, was her comment. So I just kind of left it. I was just like, right, that's fine, I'll persevere. Kind of had a belief anyway that it was meant to hurt in the first wee while. Multi-mam compresses were a godsend at this point, by the way, again in the top 10 breastfeeding essentials, so they were kind of seeing me through. But already I was getting sore, so handed off by the midwife, signed over to the health visitor, who I think came out, she was actually on holiday for the first week, so it wasn't until the 3rd week that she came out. And yeah, by that point I was pretty sore. So in between being handed over from the midwife to the health visitor, I'd actually been on the phone to, voice note with Emily of Mama's Milk, because things were getting progressively worse on my right side. Now, she had actually sent me nipple shields as part of the starter bundle that she does on her website, alongside like the collection shells, the breast pads, the silicone pump, etc. Again, I discussed them in the top 10 items for starting your breastfeeding journey. But the nipple shields, not a lot of people would say they were essential because they don't want you to rely on them, but had I not had them to hand, I do debate whether I would have continued putting Bryce on that side, because it was agony, like toe curling, razor blades, agony. And it was the only way I could continue feeding him. I'd also got obviously the silicone pump, a brand you might be aware of as Haka, but I just got it put as part of the starter bundle from Mama's Milk. Very much recommend. And I had actually expressed a couple of times just to give that side a break, because interest in my left side wasn't as bad. Now, what Emily said is your nipples are sisters, they are not twins, so depending on, you know, the baby's side as well, but also just in the slight differences in your nipple, one can hurt more than another. Can you tell he's teething? He's gnawing on my knuckle right now, if it keeps him quiet. So yeah, I pretty much knew at that point something was wrong. So when my health visitor came out the first time, I mentioned to her that the midwife had said, and I was like, but she said it's not much to think about, but I'm really sore. And she's like, I'll take a look. So she took a look, and this was week 3 postpartum, and she actually said it was enough that she did think it warranted a referral. So within North Lanarkshire, your health visitor refers you to the infant feeding team, which are based out of Wishaw. I did want to mention though how each, medical district can be different, because my friend who lives in Glasgow, she asked her health visitor to do the same, because her wee boy Dommy also had a tongue tie, and she was told she had to go to the GP, and the GP had to refer. So if you do have any questions or you do have any concerns, speak to your health visitor in the first instance, and they should be able to tell you what the case is in your medical district area, whether the health visitor can do it to the local infant feeding team, whether you need to go to the GP. She actually got her tongue tie cut, our son's tongue tie cut, at a hospital with Queen Elizabeth, which the GP had referred. And had I continued through the NHS route, there was someone qualified within the infant feeding team at Wishaw to do it for me. and he's just been sick on me. There's a nice time for a pause. So we're on week 3. I think the health visitor visited on the Tuesday. So she said that she was going to put the referral through to the infant feeding team at Wishaw. She did. They gave me a phone, I believe, the Wednesday or the Thursday, and they actually came out that Friday. So that was a good turnaround time. When I asked the midwife that came out, though, to look at his tongue tie, she said that she wasn't qualified to do that. There was only one person in the infant feeding team that was, so she didn't even look in his mouth, and she just gave me support with latch and positioning. And basically, she actually said his latch was good. I hadn't been doing it that much, so I was doing the rugby ball at that point with this, size and just comfort and whatnot. But Bryce was actually struggling to open his mouth properly, so that was part of why I thought it was a tongue tie also. So newborns' mouths are tiny, but he really was struggling to open his mouth wide enough to get a good deep latch. So even when I wasn't restricting his head, doing everything right, and she was seeing this, he wasn't opening up quite wide enough. But she gave me some new positioning to try, blah, blah, blah. And she said, give that a week, because that's what they try to do, apparently, is they try to help you with positioning, because you can feed through a tongue tie. I don't know why you would, but anyway, especially if you know that they have one, but hey-ho. That's the NHS for you in some respects, especially when I was having pain. She says, give us a call back in a week, so that was the following Friday, and let us know how you're getting on. So I was like, right, okay. I was like, So came to the Monday, Tuesday, and my health visitor actually texted me to see how I was getting on, and things had gotten worse. I was in pain again. I was continuing to use the nipple shield, and I'd had to take another day total break from that side and express just using the silicone breast pump and only feed Bryce off the other side and collect letdown and additional milk using that, just to give it a break. I was doing wet wound healing, so using my own breast milk with the collection shells. Emily had sent me actual shells, similar, it's the same kind of thing as silver cups if you look into it, just to promote natural healing. So I was trying all this and I was in pain. So I messaged her that, and she was like, listen, just phone the infant feeding team, tell them you're still in pain and you want to progress this. Because I was kind of like, why would you wait? Like, I'm sitting here in pain. You've got a mum who, and I can understand why a lot of mums do end up giving up breastfeeding if they're in agony, because I was kind of going that way, and it was only because I had the nipple shield and I had the silicone pump that I was probably continuing at this point on that side. Otherwise, I would have maybe just went to feeding off one side, which people had messaged me on Instagram saying that they ended up doing in their breastfeeding journey. Didn't know that was a thing. Or just went exclusively expressing, which meant that I pumped and just fed them breast milk with, expressed breast milk with a bottle, which will be another video because I introduced a bottle in week 2 for 1 feed a day. So I'll upload that at another point as well. So I phoned the infant feeding team and they said that was fine. Obviously I was still in agony, and I was like, listen, can I speak to the woman that would do the cut for him? And she was like, right, she's not available just now. I could get you booked into the clinic. We only run one once a week, and next week might be full already. And I was like, okay, so great, we're already another week down. So that was going to be like 2 weeks. She was like, I couldn't guarantee you'd get a space. And honestly, at that point, I was like, why would I put myself through this? I'd requested on Instagram for information on private lactation consultants that do tongue tie revisions, and there is 2 in and around Glasgow. One is Latch on Lanarkshire, and she's based out of Airdrie, and the other one is Latch World, based out of Dunfermline. I believe she travels as well. So that's the 2 if you want to have a wee look. I chose to go to Latch on Lanarkshire because I'm closer to Airdrie, and I went on the website and she had appointments available for the next day. So that was a Tuesday. I phoned the infant feeding team. She had appointments available on the Wednesday. And do you know that way? I spoke to Mum. I was like, we have the money. Why would I not do it? It was £200. If she evaluates that you have a tongue tie at the time the baby has a tongue tie, she'll cut it that day. And all insured, all above board, all good. And yeah, I was just like, why am I waiting? Why am I putting myself through this? So I just said to them, that's fine. I was like, just leave it just now. I think I'll get an... Oh, and she was like, oh, will you get an appointment? I was like, I've actually managed to get one next day. Fine. Went to Angela of Latch on Lanarkshire. it was evaluated he had a 50 to 75% posterior tongue tie, and we got it revised at £200 left. I ended up getting really upset, I think, the next day because it still wasn't a magic fix. But over the course of that week, things got progressively better. And now, even when he has a shallow latch, because I'll be honest, there will be some positions or whatever that you're doing that you don't get a latch 100%. You do need to persevere with it after they get the tongue tie revised, otherwise they will always have a lazy latch. You need to persevere, take them off and on again, off and on again. Try to teach them the new way of doing things, because they'll have been used to a restricted, obviously, way of doing it. He can open his mouth a lot wider now, just generally, and I actually saw it as well from his tongue. So his tongue really couldn't, when he was sticking it out, couldn't come out much further than his bottom lip, and it was like widening, so it was like that, whereas now he can do that. And it was so funny because he was like it was just, you could tell that I think he had renewed movement. And after I got a bit down the day or two following that, as I said, it got progressively better, and it meant that things do not hurt anymore. It's so much easier to feed. I kind of went down after I got mastitis. I'll do that in a separate video on that side. At one point I'd kind of went back to favouring one side, so I wasn't feeding them as much. It was maybe 2-1 on the good boob to the bad one. I built it back up to feeding them on both sides thereafter, so we're back to totally on both sides equal, and it's absolutely fine, and it was totally worth doing. So ultimately I went private because, one, I could afford it. Two, I wasn't willing to be in pain for longer than I had to. And for me, it ultimately ensured the success of my breastfeeding journey. I know people that give up due to the pain. I know people that give up because the process takes far too long. As I said, my friend that had to refer to the GP, eventually it got sorted fairly quickly, but she'd been kind of fobbed off in the early stages about him not having a tongue tie. I had originally asked in the hospital if they could evaluate it, and they said it's not something they do, which seems ludicrous when they push breastfeeding so much. So for me, it's equipping yourself with the knowledge to evaluate it, and also pushing for what you need to. I'm not saying that you need to go private, but don't just accept that you need to work through latch and positioning. If you're in pain, there is a reason for it, especially if they're telling you your latch is okay. Also, don't rely on a midwife and health visitor telling you your latch is okay. Ideally, you want a lactation consultant or a specific infant feeding team that is their day-to-day job. Because I hear, again, so many stories of people being told just by their midwife that deals with them postpartum, or their health visitor, they are not fully trained in evaluating that and making sure that you get the best care. So I would thoroughly recommend it. I would go back and even do it earlier, which means that I wouldn't need to go through it. I wish that I hadn't accepted the, to have a go at that for a week, but ultimately I got it dealt with a lot quicker regardless, and I would do it again. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a note. You can DM me on Instagram, or obviously leave a comment and I'll get back to you. Let me know if you found it useful. There are other signs as well. If your baby is on the boob quite a lot, and I know I mentioned this earlier on in the video, but say they're not gaining weight effectively, it could be because they're not actually transferring milk as effectively because their latch isn't good because of a tongue tie. If you have any issues whatsoever, don't be afraid of reaching out. I think that's the ultimate message. I could go into every example, but you can tell if something's not right. And if something's not right and you want to continue breastfeeding, reach out to people, whether that be online or via your health visitor or infant feeding team or whatever. Use the resources available to you. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you found it useful. As always, like, subscribe if you want to be notified of any future videos. I'm going to be doing a wee bit more obviously on the breastfeeding journey going forward, because I'm nearly finished with uploading the kind of pregnancy and labour ones now. So if there is anything specific you want me to talk about, please leave me a comment and let me know, and I will speak to you next time. Bye guys.